Okay, how about we start? So as you have seen, I have given the grades for the PSET and they were given to you. So I thought for a while how I should allow you to see your copies, and it's going to be very messy if we try to have some sort of session where when everybody comes and see their copy. So instead, what I want to do is simply give you a full list of everybody who corrected everybody, because of course some TA may have corrected people that are not from his group because of the language, or because it was because for the problem set, for instance, you could work in team, not necessarily from your own group. So yeah, I'll do that, and then you ask them, and maybe you have some Zoom session. I'll leave them the pleasure of deciding how they want to do that. Anyway, it's done. The thing is, you're perfectly entitled to see your copy for sure. So don't stress out about this. About the final exam, I have finished it this morning. So I did something different. That usually I don't ask anybody and I just send it and that's it. Now I ask my TAs to tell me what they thought about it, and they said, yeah, maybe that question is a bit more difficult. So I removed the more difficult question. So I think it's a fair exam. It covers most of the topics with a few questions each. To do well, I would advise you to not do only stuff that you see in your TD. You should also read the class carefully. I have this bias that since I'm not giving the TDs, then sometimes I don't have the same questions that were covered there in my head when I write the exam. Of course, it's very useful for you to practice with them, so do that. But do not neglect the class. Read carefully what I'm saying, and remember the important concepts. What I told about what happened on the Easter Island, what happened in all these stories about hyperinflations. They're all useful to nice bits of the interesting detail that might help you answer some question. And why is that the case? Well, it's going to be a managed exam, as you may have heard. So managed exam is it makes it much easier to just give a multiple choice exam. So it's going to be 100% multiple choice. But of course, some questions are, so here's the model, here are the parameters with the numbers, and then is the answer 1 or 1/2 or 2 or 1.19? So, it's a bit like answering some long form question. It's just that you have to select the right answer in your multiple choices. Do bring a calculator, or since it's online, you're going to be at home, so don't forget to have it there. It's going to be very useful for one of the problems. And yeah, so I'm going to send a message with all of this, and also so why I did still haven't done it, because I wanted also to finish what I'm writing for you. I'm writing extra questions or harder exercises to do on chapter 2, just because this was mostly something that we saw on video. So maybe you haven't had time to ask the questions or stuff like that. So yeah, I'll ask some extra harder questions, and hopefully you're going to be very ready for the exam. If you practice like at night under the rain, then if at the exam it's a easy question when it's sunny and everything, then it's easier. Okay, so any question about what I just said?
Do we have to review the first chapter as well, the
Yes.
solution model?
No, because it's long enough as it is. You know, you have the fish industry, Easter Island, population, OLG models, and hyperinflation. So if you're asking for an extra question about solo again, maybe I can put it, but I wouldn't count on it because it's just we've seen enough already in the class.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Will we have the sustainability chapter?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
And
so it starts at chapter 2.
Okay. And you have said we have to have what for one exercise?
Calculator.
Ah, okay. Okay. Thank you.
So, sir, we have all chapters except the solution model.
Yeah. So so except chapter 1, then it's all of it. Yeah. Thing is, chapter 2, we were almost not really finished when I gave you the question, and I was not too pleased about the way it was not very well answered. So I want you to understand it better.
And is it possible to show our copy of the problem set?
Yes. What I said is I'm going to create some list with everybody who graded with everybody and who graded what. So you know, okay, I'm going to I have to email that person to see my copy and ask for how they were corrected.
Okay, thank you.
And if there is some issue and you don't agree with the way they corrected, then at some point I'm the one who give them all the grading scheme and all the way they should grade. So yeah, if you don't agree, you can so first start asking them, and then if there's really a disagreement, then you can ask me. So okay.
Okay, thank you.
So the program for today is so we finish hyperinflation, and then I'm going to say a couple of stuff about Easter Island, since it's the most difficult part of the whole class. If we get enough time to, but yeah, we should, if we don't waste too much time. Okay, so just to put our mind back into what we were saying, I suggest starting here with some, no, this I already talked about it. So yeah, Zimbabwe, because we haven't talked about the Zimbabwe case. So yeah, what happened in Zimbabwe? They got their independence in the 80s, and then so a couple of difficult situations. So as many ex-colonies, there was great hope that they would grow fast, and a lot of foreign capital started to be invested in the country, but they eventually the projects didn't pan out, and the country had borrowed a lot of money and couldn't repay their foreign investors. So what happened when some rich person is own money, usually they find a way to get paid back. So the way to do that internationally is to ask the IMF, so International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank, but especially the IMF. So imagine I'm the US and I have a lot of money invested in Zimbabwe, and Zimbabwe says, oh, I can't pay you anymore. So then you say, oh no, but I want my money back, please. So let's see if we can have some arrangements. So then they ask the IMF, oh, could you please restructure the Zimbabwean debt, and so then allow Zimbabwe to pay back its debtor. But so it's not that the Zimbabwe doesn't own any money to anybody now. It's just that they own the money to the IMF. but then the US gets his money back, or France, or whoever invested in. So that's a way for rich countries to always get their money back. But then the IMF says, oh, but okay, we agree to lend you money, but it's not for free. Now we want to be paid back. And back then they were asking themselves, so how should we ensure that they pay us back? Well, they have to grow, and so there's only one reason why they didn't grow. It's because they don't know how to manage their economy well. So we're going to teach them with something that was called structural adjustment programs. Basically asking themselves, so what is our best understanding of how to foster economic growth? Well, we just look at the most successful countries in the world, the US or England or Europe, and we say, okay, let's implement exactly what they do in these countries. But it didn't work all that well, unfortunately, for many of the countries that were recipients of the program, simply because there are cultural differences and cultural aspects to the institutions in each country that are not reflected. And so anyways, the growth didn't pan out, and at some point they really didn't, the government couldn't have enough money. So yeah, they had budgetary problems. So yeah, it was an easy fix to start maybe issuing a bit more currency than the economy really needed. Then there was a confiscation of land by the black people that were poor to from the rich white farmers. Problem is, if you just take over some farm and you say, yeah, I'm the owner, but maybe it's not that easy to manage properly a farm, and so the agricultural industry collapsed. So that's really, there was this dip in food production that made food prices go up, and there was the problem with the government budget. Plus, then the third thing is the Mugabe government wanted to help their neighbor in their war, and they really they were out of money at that point. But they said, "Oh no, don't worry, we'll just print more." So hyperinflation didn't start right away, but it crept up and up and up as people kind of got the idea that something wrong was happening. Yeah, there was also economic sanctions because of violations of human rights, but it's not that clear how much that played a role. Oliveira Effect, that's an important concept. So that's what happens when you run out of money and inflation kicks in. Then since it takes time, there's a certain delay between the time that people work and so you know how much they own to the government, and the time when the government actually gets the money. Then if there's this delay and inflation is quite rapid, then it means that what the government gets is even lower than they would have gotten otherwise. So then it amplifies even more the need to print more money. Yeah, so a lot of bad things went up at the same time, and that's what happened. So you see that, so it's kind of, so in the 80s, 85, so that's annual inflation in Zimbabwe. So nothing too bad, 10%, it's higher than 5% or 2% like we have now, but it's not that bad. It really started going up in 2000, and then by 2008, I think that's when it kicks in. When it's exactly the shock that I'm talking about, when people look at each other and they say, "Oh, there's something wrong." I think what I was planning on using the Zimbabwean currency for my retirement, but I think it's going to be worthless. So then people start trying to get rid of it. And you see the astronomical numbers again. So yeah, 10 to the 11% inflation in that period. And you see that's yearly inflation, but then that's just 2000. Oh, that's so funny. I just realized that. April 2007, July 2007, and then 2008, and then 2007 again. So I think there's something fishy with my. So that's 2008 basically. So that's yeah, October 2008 was the. Yeah, I think that it should be 8 and 8. These two numbers. I don't know why it's 7. So you see what happens when people get freaked out and think it's things are going bad. So in 1 month, in mid-November, there was a 79 billion% inflation rate. So that's quite bad. So people say that actually when they went to the bank, the problem is they had computer, but they didn't have enough places to write all the zeros for the deposits and loans. So that what they would have to do is take a piece of paper and say, okay, that person just deposited 100, but multiplied this number by 10 million or add 10 zeros to it. So that's how crazy the things were in Zimbabwe. Even the computers couldn't handle the money. So that's what when we say that inflation makes everything go away, go right. That's what we mean. So yeah, go ahead.
Could you repeat what the Oliveira effect is? I didn't really understand.
Okay, it's so for instance, in France, when you owe money, so you work for a certain period and then you pay your taxes afterwards, for instance, maybe at the end of the year, or sometimes it's delayed by 1 year. It depends on the country. But then, so if you have 79 billion% inflation in 1 month, then you worked here, and then we say, okay, you owe me, I don't know, $12,000, or maybe less, maybe 500,000, and then here you pay that money. Well, that money is worth nothing. The government can't do anything about it. It's not even worth the effort to collect it. So instead, what the government does is just say, okay, I'm going to print bills that are even larger. So instead of having, so I'm going to have my my $100 trillion bill. That's the only way I can still function as a government and produce services.
Oh, okay. So they finance the government spendings by printing more money?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay.
It's the fact that you shouldn't do that. A responsible government shouldn't use seniorage as the way to finance. Seniorage is tax on people who own money. You shouldn't do that. You should tax people or ask so have either income tax or value-added tax, and then you finance your way with that. And the central bank should, in principle, make sure that the price levels are stable. But then if you can't do that, if you can't finance yourself with taxes, then that's when you say, oh, I'm going to forget about the price stability and I just need to go with the government's activities. But you see that this is just temporary. It's okay, during, say, that time it may work, but then people realize, oh, there's something wrong. I see 100 trillion Zimbabwean dollar around. Then I'm pretty sure that there's something wrong with the economy, and I don't want to keep Zimbabwean dollars anymore, because it's I'm just going to not be able to spend it later on. Or I can spend it, but it's not going to buy me anything. Yeah, so that's Oliveira Tanzi. As almost always, all the governments, they said, oh, hyperinflation is illegal. So that's an easy way to, if you don't like something, you make it illegal. So what they did was, okay, there's a price freeze. So it's illegal to charge more than the price you were charging at the X period. But, you know, it's, people can't be fooled, and people can easily fool the government, and then it just didn't work, and people found many ways to circumvent this, so it didn't work. There were multiple plans, but eventually what worked is just said, okay, we give up. What was amazing with Zimbabwe is that they never wanted to give up. They went as far as printing $100 trillion bills, but still, it's, if people don't have faith, people don't have faith. So yeah, so at some point they said, okay, you can use whatever. So it's not against the law anymore in Zimbabwe to trade in whatever currency you like. We give up. We lost, and but it worked. It just saying, okay, we lost. We know you don't trust the national currency, so use US dollars, use euros, use any other thing you may want, and then so that worked because people have faith in these alternative currencies, and after a while they just so they were kind of able to balance their budget, and they reissue some new Zimbabwean currency, and the inflation went back down to 5% a year. And yeah, so growth resumed in 2010. So is that over? That was a very recent episode. It's mid 2000s. But in 2019, there was a combination of economic crisis and a cyclone that again was very bad for the agriculture, and again agricultural prices went up, and there was 300% inflation in August. So that's not that good, and this year it's continuing. So hyperinflation is not something of the past that's going away. It's with us because it's money is something that's it's easy to lose faith in money. Money is again, it only has if it's a floating currency, then the only thing that keeps trust in this currency is the belief that other people trust it. But if you don't believe that, then pretty easily things can go bad. Yeah, so that was Brazil. Yeah, go ahead.
I did not really understand how dollarization allowed the decrease of inflation.
Well, it's not that now the Zimbabwean dollar was good again. They just said, okay, you can use for a certain period other currencies in Zimbabwe. So then that means that, say, I don't know the details, so but so I could read more about it. I would say, oh, next class I'm going to tell you, but there's no next class. But so essentially that means that if you can go to the bank and say, oh, I don't care about my bank account in Zimbabwean dollar anymore, but I want to deposit US dollars, or I want to, you know, and you go to the store and you say, I don't want to pay in Zimbabwean dollar, I want to pay in US dollar, and the store says yes, then okay, everything is fine. Then people have trust that the dollar is always going to be good. So you don't have this problem of people always having to keep track of how their money is going to lose value over time. And eventually, the government reintroduced some new currency. So in Zimbabwe, they don't use this anymore. So they have some new currency. So that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that by magic people thought that this was worth something. No, this isn't worth anything.
So it's psychological.
Yes, it's So right now in Europe, we use euros, and we don't always think, oh, what if my bank account holds euros, but they're not worth anything in 2 years? We don't think that. We can have long-term contracts. And we can have faith that things are under control. So that's what it is to live in a country with no problem, inflation problems. Actually, so in macroeconomics in recent years, there was the opposite debate about zero lower bound. So so interest rates are very low, and inflation tends to be very low. So that's some people say that the target inflation should be higher than it is. So yeah, that's the opposite problem. But again, I don't want to tell you exactly what happened in Zimbabwe. All I know is that what got them out of the crisis is to allow for for instance so in Brazil, what got them out of the crisis was to anchor people's expectation with a new currency. And what was fun about this currency is that it didn't have to be anchored to anything concrete, but people trusted it because they have seen prices being stable. So that's how they got rid of hyperinflation. So in Zimbabwe, they put their trust in some other currency that's not anchored to anything. The US dollar is not anchored to any quantity of gold, for instance, but still people have a huge trust in the US dollar. And every time there's something wrong in the world, the US dollar, even if it's sometimes in the US, people kind of feel insecure and they think, oh yeah, I'm going to buy US dollar because I know this is stable and it's always going to be worth something. Okay, so now I should really start the Kegen model, or otherwise we're never going to finish it. So yeah, know these episodes, it's useful for the exam. Okay, so here, I think we were here last time. So this is a summary of everything we've learned so far with these episodes. So you could really classify the components of hyperinflation in two categories. So one is triggers, and the other is the anticipation that are modified and make hyperinflation real. So the trigger is there is too much, the money supply is too high compared to the amount of good that people have to buy. That's simply as simple as that. Can be because either the amount of good goes down, so that's reduction in economic activity. So it can be like something like war. So that's what happened in Hungary, for instance, or Weimar Republic, or a supply shock. So that's what you could say happened in Zimbabwe, because there was this shock to the agricultural system that reduced the output of agriculture. Or now in 2019, that again there was this cyclone that reduced the agricultural output, or recession. So all these things that suddenly you have too much money supply. So these things don't reduce the money supply right away. It's still out there in the circulation. But then, people think, oh, I would like to spend my money, but somehow there's not enough money there's not enough stuff to buy. Other thing is monetary expansion. So that's the other side. So either you reduce the number of goods or you increase the supply of money. So that's what they did, for instance, in Hungary. They wanted to stimulate the economy by issuing even more the currency. That was not such a good idea. Or political instability, when everybody starts printing money and saying that they have the right to do it. Or like they did in Zimbabwe, so printing money to finance deficits. So that's the initial event. But if people's anticipation didn't change, then this could be some momentary thing. It could be that, oh, you have a bad recession for a few years, but people have, so that's, for instance, in 2008, so things were bad in many Western countries, but people didn't think that all of a sudden we were headed to hyperinflation. And things went back to normal, and even though there was quantitative easing in the U.S., and many economists were freaked out by that because they were saying, okay, right now we're stuck at the zero lower bound, but just wait for growth to kick in. You see that then we'll get a crazy cycle of hyperinflation. So some economists are really worried that in any day, in any Western country, you could have hyperinflation. But yeah, I'm not my specialty is not microeconomics, so I don't want to say for sure, but I wouldn't lose too much sleep over that. So a lot of people have bet for inflation that never materialized in recent years. But then what happens, for instance, if you are in Zimbabwe and you already know that you have fresh in your mind, so in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, you have fresh in your mind this episode of hyperinflation, then you are much more nervous. And you think, oh, maybe is it? Like, is hyperinflation going to start again? And then maybe you want to start to get rid of your Zimbabwean dollar faster than you would have otherwise. And you see your neighbors doing the same, and you see prices in store going up, and then your anticipation about the future can start to kick in, and that's really when the hyperinflation starts. People start losing the faith in money. So then people have to ask for higher wages to keep their purchasing power. Retail prices have to go up to match the wages, otherwise firms are going to go bankrupt. Interest rates have to go up to reflect the fact that there's inflation. So if there's a very high inflation, then you have to give at least even higher interest rate to your customer, otherwise nobody's going to put money in your bank. And yeah, there's also this Oliveira effect. So it's harder to collect tax, so there's even more pressure to print even more money. Well, it's not harder to collect tax. You collect taxes, but you don't collect them quickly enough, and it's not the tax dollars are not enough to finance your government. So the Kegen model is a model which encompasses this mechanism there. So here's what he says. So he says basically that sometimes prices change so fast, so you see in 1 month how they can change incredibly fast, that for him, even the cash balances, so the supply of money, cannot explain how hyperinflation, how fast hyperinflation occurs. So he says there has to be something else, and that something else is this these anticipation that kick in. Is that things don't happen too much, and then at some point people really start getting scared, and that's when prices go up and up and up super fast. So there is this extra layer of things happening that's over and above just the cash balances in the economy. So then the model in itself is quite simple. So we have two equations. So the individual's demand for money and the evolution of inflation expectation over time. And this is key. It's the most not controversial, but it's what makes the model work. And it's because we don't. So this is not debated too much. So demand for money is quite the same in most macro model. Well, I don't know. You have many macro models, but the expectations, since it's psychological, then it's that's something that's easier to discuss. So is it true that people have this type of way that they anticipate the future, or maybe people anticipate the future differently? Who knows? In more recent models, we have what we call rational expectation, meaning that people anticipate the future perfectly no matter what. But that's not what we get in the Kegen model. In the Kegen model, you'll see what the type of inflation we have. All right, so let's start with money demand. So money demand is simply our equation of exchange. So this is in log, so it would be mv equals py, but then I take logs of everything, so I get log of capital M is small m plus log of capital V small v equals small p, price level, plus small y, real output. Right, so this is the same as we got earlier. Yeah. And here is, if I wanted to explain the model, if you want an image of what's going on, it's this. These are the triggers. So money supply goes up, or you have a recession, or we can even have a change in real interest rates. But so this is very likely to be a real trigger. So you think of Brazil or Hungary. This is quite likely to be a trigger, although it can. So you can have some shock or crisis that doesn't really cause hyperinflation, but it's something that's plausible. Change in real interest rate, that's it could, that's something that you can put in the model, but I wouldn't know any episode of hyperinflation that was caused by a change in real interest rate. All right, so this changes prices today. So there's, say, excess M. So so if you take everything else as given, so M increases, then prices have to increase again, simply to match. So imagine that much more people want to come to my store because they have lots of money to spend. And then I am thinking to myself, oh, maybe there's something weird going on. Maybe I should just raise my prices because I have many more customers. So maybe it's inflation, or maybe just people want to buy my stuff. But anyways, I can't produce overnight much more than I was able to get for my store with my inventory. So I'm just going to raise my price. So that's one way that things that it can happen. So for whatever reason, then people change their price, and then the kicker here, the real thing that makes the Kegen model is how a change in prices today influences how people believe inflation is going to be tomorrow. So here we write pi et. So inflation in period t is the change in prices from period t to period t plus 1. And it's at period t, since I don't know what is going to be prices in period t plus 1. So that's why I have to write pi t expected. And what happens is we're just going to see that people see prices going up today a bit, and they think, oh, I think it means that prices are still going up tomorrow and the day after. So it's like any bubble or any any type of anticipation-driven change in prices. So people see price go up today, and they say, "Oh, I think price is going to go up tomorrow too." Maybe a wrong anticipation, maybe a real anticipation. But what's even funnier is the following. So if really there's a hyperinflation that is going on, then it might then you might think to yourself, oh, people are going to lose faith in money, and tomorrow prices are going to still continue to go down. So it's even if I know that people are not rational to believe that, it would be rational for me as somebody who wants to not lose money to say, oh, I anticipate that things are going to go wrong. And for instance, if the government, because of inflation, starts to print even more money to get finance, then it's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. So just because of that, it would be rational for me to anticipate inflation tomorrow, even though I know that the reason why people think that there's going to be inflation is not justified for some reason, then it becomes justified just because I know that I'm living with my neighbors that do think that there's going to be inflation. So this is all these things are very hard to quantify. It's not like accounting for GDP, for instance, or real stuff or investment. This is people's anticipation. You can say many things about it, but that's some way we can think about them. Yeah. So as soon as you realize, oh, inflation is going to happen, then you want to get rid of money as quickly as possible. You don't want to hold money with you. You want to put it in the bank with a very good interest because the bank agrees to give you a much better interest. Or you want to get gold or get diamonds or get US dollars instead of your own currency. So you want to pay with Zimbabwean dollar, but accept only other things than Zimbabwean dollar because you know that Zimbabwean dollar are going to lose their value. So that's a change in velocity V. And this change of velocity makes even prices today even change even faster. So that's of course a vicious cycle. That's a self-fulfilling cycle, and that's what that was Kegen's genius insight. So we're going to see that his model is very good. It has some flaws because it's an old model, but still this mechanism is super interesting. All right. So what is the link between velocity of money and inflation? So in his model, he says it goes with interest here, nominal interest. It could be some other channel, but this is one. So what I need is some way to get rid of my money and have something else instead. So that's something else in his model is putting my money to the bank and getting a good nominal interest on my loan. But it could be again holding other currency or some other mean. So I'm not saying that that's the only way that velocity has a link with expected inflation, but that's the way we do it in Kegen's model. And so we do it in a very simple way. So we say that it's a linear relationship. There's just velocity is a linear relation, positive function of a nominal interest rate I. And so, yeah, the story is bonds and money are both safe assets in nominal terms. So there's no risk to holding money or to holding, say, bonds or deposits at the bank. But there is opportunity cost to holding money. Why? Because the longer you hold money and you don't put it in the bank, then it loses. So you could get good nominal interest on your loan if you hold government bonds or if you have deposits. So what you want to do if nominal interest rate goes up is, say you want to buy milk, then you cannot buy milk using some type of safe but safe asset that gives you a good interest, you have to say go to the bank, withdraw some cash, run to the store, buy your milk, then get the change, and then go back home and then put that back in the bank. So you hold to your money. That's velocity here, as you don't want to hold your money too long. So velocity goes up if nominal interests go up. Yeah, and then there's this Fischer equation that is simply that nominal interest rate are real interest rate plus expected inflation. So there is the underlying idea here that I didn't write it, but it's there, is that if expected inflation goes up, then banks know that that nobody is going to accept to deposit loans in the bank because it's so if you deposit for 2 years, then once you withdraw your money, then it's not worth anything. So they are going to change their nominal interest. So for instance, I think in Brazil, there was like 5,000% interests on loans, because that's how you could convince people to deposit the money in your bank. Yeah, so this is, and of course, so that's the link that we were talking about, expected inflation. That's going to be a positive, has a positive effect on velocity. So that's this link there. All right. Well, my mouse is not working well. So questions about this? Okay. So that's yeah, that's this thing describe. Now this link we need to describe, and we're done basically. So how do we? Oh yeah. So just right now, what I can do is go back and substitute this. So instead of velocity, I can substitute it with alpha I, what I had here. And then I can substitute I with RT plus expected inflation at time t. So that's what I can do here. And I I put prices on that side, and I put this term on that side, RT plus expected inflation. So you see, if you know how to do arithmetic, you can do that. Now, so this has many things inside it. There is, again, R, there is Y, but so for the time being, we're going to simplify our job by simply saying that R changes very slowly. So R is really interest rate. So they don't vary too fast. And so they especially don't vary as fast as this, for instance. You know, they're not multiplied by that speed. And nominal GDP, or not nominal, but real GDP doesn't change that fast too. So real GDP, so in Europe or the US, it changes by a few percentage point each year, 2%, 3%, 4%, when that's a super good year. In China, it's 9%, but you know, it's that's like a snail compared to how fast prices can change and money supply can change if countries decide to change it. So what we are going to do is simply say that, okay, we just get rid of these things. So this is in log terms. So what we can say is we don't really have units yet. So let's just say that they're big Y. So Y equals to 1. And we're going to say that nominal interest, real interest rate equals to 1. So then what you get is, so log of y equals small y equals 0. And Also, what we get is log of. Yeah, no, that was already in log. Sorry. Yeah, so yeah, so this has nothing to. That's okay. So don't listen to me about this. So yeah, this is 0, and we can say the same thing for interest rate. So we can just get rid of them. So here we set that to 0, and here we set that to 0. So they don't have they don't move fast enough to have an impact. Yeah, go ahead.
So RT is equal to 0?
Well, it's not equal to 0, but we can, the model's conclusion with in terms of the impact of money on prices doesn't change with the level of I choose for RT. So I can just replace it with 0. But you see that in the final version, I put it back if we want to know what happens to if there is some change in RT, for instance. But right now we just we don't write it just to have fewer terms to work with.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so we get this this thing there, which is our money demand function, which is, it pretty much looks like yeah, it looks a bit like we had in OLG models. We had so OLG model, if you remember, we had the money that was equal to price times output omega times beta over 1 plus beta. So this so we had price here, so it's in log, and we just said that omega is 1, but it's essentially the same sort of money demand equation. So we have here that if maybe I can, yeah, I've been talking for a while, so should make somebody talk. So can you explain, for instance, the link between M and P? So what happens to this to prices if money supply goes up at time t, for instance?
If money supply goes up and production doesn't change, prices will go up as well.
Perfect. Yes. And yeah, and then what the other link here is expected inflation. So if expected inflation goes up, then minus alpha expected inflation goes down. So minus P needs to go down too. So prices have to go up. So it's the same thing. There's this. So is this the real link between expected inflation and prices? Is this a constant? Well, you could have some different model that would have some more complicated relationship, but in Kegen's model, we use this simple relationship that is good enough for relatively mild or even serious values of expected inflation change and price change. Although at some point in the extremes, then it might be a bit different. But that's what we assume. All right, so final piece of the puzzle, as I was saying, is now how do people form their anticipation? So we call these adaptative expectations, which is saying that my expectation for today's inflation, so essentially my expectation for tomorrow's price level, is based on how expectation of last year was, plus but multiplied by lambda, which is between 0 and 1. So essentially, it's a weighted average of what I did anticipate for today's, well, last year's inflation, and what really happened. So this PT minus 1 is what really, so there it's really the inflation without the expectation. And so what we write here is, oh yeah, so don't read that. I'm going to quiz you, it's more fun. Okay. So forget what you just read. So I'm going to ask you. So what happens if lambda is close to 0? Say that in economics term.
The inflation is nearly constant.
Not exactly. So this, yeah, what we are trying to model here is not the actual inflation, but the expected inflation, right?
The agents almost don't make mistakes when they form anticipations in what concerns inflation.
So making a mistake, what you would say is my prediction for the future is perfect, right?
Or nearly perfect if lambda isn't exactly equal to 0.
So that's not exactly the right answer.
People change their anticipation very quickly.
Yes. So yes. So that what it means is my expectation for this year's inflation, so or this month's inflation, is exactly what was the actual price change between last month and this month, or last year and this year. So it means that if, for instance, the price level went up 3%, then I'm sure that the price level tomorrow will go up to 3%. Might be true, might not be true, but I freak out. It's like in Zimbabwe, if they have just this slight increase in prices, then everybody thinks, oh, that's it, we're going back to hyperinflation. We have to get our US dollars again and get rid of our Zimbabwean dollar as fast as possible. So I'm not saying it's exactly what is going to happen, but it is how people form expectation. And on the other hand, if lambda equals 1, then it means that people don't modify their expectation of inflation at all. So even if actual inflation is 1,000%, and tomorrow's expectation is 2,000%, then if they thought that inflation would be 2%, then they're still going to think that inflation is going to be 2% and 2%. So they have perfect faith in their government's ability to maintain everything under control, and the central bank's ability to maintain their price level at their good level. All right, so let me erase this. Yeah, so this is what it is saying. Yes.
What represents the lambda?
Oh, it's between 0 and 1. It's just some weight.
Ah, okay. It's not. really a thing.
It's I decide that it's some lambda that is between 0 and 1. So
Okay.
it's just weighted average.
Okay, thank you.
Well, actually, that's something that we're going to estimate after. So what's amazing is Kegen model was in the 50s, and still computers have barely been invented, but still he computed a lot of, so I don't know if he used a computer or he asked his students to compute it by hand, but he managed to get interesting estimates for lambda and alpha with the data he used. So that's we're going to see that later. All right. So that's it. Now, so now what we have to do is solve the model. In many instances, what you have to get good at is to play with time periods. So, for instance, expected inflation, there is price today and price tomorrow. So you have to know that you can use some equation and change the value of t. So for instance, one equation, so this is what we had here. So I can just divide by alpha or minus alpha, I think. Yeah, minus alpha. So expected inflation today is minus 1 over alpha times mt minus pt. And then I can also do the same thing for yesterday. So expected inflation yesterday was 1 minus 1 over alpha times mt minus 1 minus pt minus 1. And then I can use these expected inflation, these values, to substitute them in the previous equation and get everything into quantity that I do observe. So as a researcher, I do observe the money supply, the price level, but I don't observe people's mind. But what I have, though, is some idea of how their mind might work, and I can infer it with these real quantities. So what I do is so I just use expected inflation at time t and expected inflation at time t minus 1. And I can substitute that in this equation there. And that's it. That's the whole model. So it's really 2, or you could say 3 equations. And you do that. So here is expected inflation at time t, expected inflation at time t minus 1. So I substitute these 2 things there. And I have this. So here is if there's this alpha there, then it means that this is mediated by the link that I had with velocity. And if there is this lambda there, then it's mediated by the way that expectations are expected inflation is formed. That my expectations about inflation is formed. And then the only thing I have to do is that now collect terms. So what I want is to explain the prices at a certain period as function of prices last year, money last year, and money this year, and money last year. And that's it. That's the whole model. And that's what Kegen now estimates. So he's going to estimate this this term there, this term there, and this term there, and use these to infer what lambda, the way that I place on actual inflation and or last year's expected inflation and actual inflation, and alpha, the link between expected inflation and velocity, what they actually are based on what is going to estimate. And I told you that I could, so you know, these YT and RT were not lost. They just they're there. Just I didn't want to put them in the model to simplify things, but if you want to keep them, then this is the whole equation. So prices would also be a function of real output, real interest rate. So of course, yeah, I can ask you, for instance, so this is the whole equation. So prices today is function of prices yesterday, money today, money yesterday, real output today, real interest rate today, also real output yesterday, real interest rate yesterday. So just to see again, to confirm that you understand what's going on. So imagine that yeah, let's say real output today increases. So what according to Kegen's model, what happens to prices today?
Prices decrease
Yes.
because
And
if YT increase, it's bigger than lambda YT minus 1.
yeah, so I'm saying, for instance, if I consider what prices would be for a certain YT, and then I say, oh, but what if YT is 50% bigger, for instance? What happens to prices? So you're right, except for the slight thing that this looks like it's positive. Sorry. It looks like it's positive, but it may not be because I haven't said anything about alpha. Maybe it's not too large. So alpha is how fast do you get rid of your money when you think that there's inflation is coming. So maybe it's in Europe, I would say people don't really care. So I wouldn't change my habits because I anticipate that inflation is going up by a few percent. But who knows? I haven't said anything. So maybe if it's like 10, so even if 1 minus lambda, this is between 0 and 1, of course. But if it's multiplied by 10, then 1 minus 10 could be negative. But why do I think it's not, why I think your answer is good? It's because it would not make any sense. It would mean that, so 1 minus here, so if you consider like this term, for instance, so I would have 1 minus alpha, 1 minus lambda negative. So it means that if I increase the money supply today, prices decrease today, which is nonsense to me. And you could even imagine that, so if this is close to 1, then it means that you can get 1 minus 1, so 1 over 0, so you don't have any solution. So yeah, so it would be, so that's what I said by saying that the Kegen's model is very good, but it has its limitations. So this is one of it. So you have to sort of put bound on what value of lab alpha can have, otherwise you can get very crazy answers with it. So does it mean it's a bad model? No, it's just that it's a old-fashioned model. So in today's macro model, we would have what we call micro foundations. So we would have full-fledged microeconomic model, which models how some agent wants to spend its money, how much money cash balances he wants to keep with himself. Here we don't have that. We just see that at all time, there's this linear relation between expected inflation and prices. Maybe that's true, maybe that's not true. But so it has the virtue of making the model very simple. All right, so that is the model. And then you can use that to basically ask yourself something like, what happens if, say, MT goes up? What happens if, what you could do too is to have things not in terms of prices and money, but changes in prices, changes in money supply. So you can have, you can manipulate this equation in many ways. So you have one exercise in your TD about this. Yeah, but so be sure to understand how this works. Right.
In the exercises where we have the value of lambda and alpha.
Yeah, so the kind of thing I can say is, what I can give you is, this is the value for the coefficient of, so I'm not there yet, it's going to be clearer, but I can say, oh, I'm estimating this equation there, where this is some term, this is some term, this is some term, and then deduce what must have been the value of lambda and alpha. So if you have two equations, for instance, then you can deduce them. Or I can tell you, oh, this is the value of lambda and alpha. Now deduce what happens if MT goes up, for instance. Or deduce what happens if MT minus 1 went up, like 2 periods in the future. So you see that the change in price in money affects changes in prices, but then next period, this is reflected in the prices 1 period ago, and in money 1 period ago too. So you have many different mechanisms that can happen to that equation.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do we have to know how to find this equation? And
it's again, it's good to. So I don't want you to learn by heart. Oh, this is what is real. This is what is real, and learn exactly the derivation of the equation. The thing I may say at the exam is for any part of the class is, this is my model. So I give you like this equation there, for instance, MT plus VT equals PT plus YT. I give you this equation there, VT is alpha IT. I give you this equation there, and then I tell you find this, for instance. So then you have to say, oh, how should I do that? Oh, well, maybe I can substitute V here. And then maybe I can substitute alpha I can substitute the I with this thing there. And then, oh, magic, I find this. Well, if I said that Y and R is 0. So I'm going to be very generous with the number of equations I give you. And then I ask you manipulate them, or what I can give you too. So in what I'm going to tell you what I did for the exam. So so it's not easy to ask you something like, oh, derive this equation, and then you end up with this super long expression. So, and then ask you, A, is this very long expression, or B, this expression where I deleted this lambda, for instance. This would be not very nice. So, but what I do is say something like, oh, lambda is 0.5, alpha is 1, and then find what is this equation, for instance. So you have to substitute the terms, and then you get some coefficients for M and P, and then M and T minus 1, and then you know how to compute them. This type of thing. So I want you to know how to use the material I give you to manipulate it. Of course, it's not very long because otherwise you're going to make computation mistakes. Yeah. So in that sense, don't learn by heart exactly this model. but know how to manipulate some equation. Something that's very good anytime is to know what is the growth rate of a variable, because in the growth rate you have something like prices today, prices yesterday. This is in log terms, for instance. Yeah, so yeah, be fluent in manipulating expressions and understanding how do you manipulate them. But yeah, so this is true for OLG, for Kegen, for Easter Island, for fishes. Yeah. All right, so in his original paper, what Kegen did was estimate this. And he found that in some way, in some instances, he had a coefficient that of here that was larger than 1. How can you have this? Well, you can have this only if this is negative and this is negative, because this is always smaller than this. So then all sorts of crazy things can happen when this thing becomes larger than 1, because it means that if prices yesterday were higher, then just because of this link there, then it means that today's prices are going to be even higher and tomorrow's prices are going to be even higher. And you can get these crazy processes. So here I wrote to you, so you, of course, you're just learning econometrics, so your time series is the hardest part of econometrics, maybe, or yeah, many things are not that easy in econometrics, but time series are tricky. And this is what we call the autoregressive process of order 1. So it's just if I have xt equals to alpha xt minus 1 plus some error term, and if alpha is smaller than 1, then so here I chose alpha equals 0.9. And what you see is if there's something weird that happens in one period, then because the coefficient is not larger than 1, then these errors die down over time. And you always get close to 0, to the mean. Here the mean is 0. But if you have alpha equals 1.1, then you can crazy things can happen. So this is if alpha equals 1, we see we call this a unit root. Again, this is way down the road. It's not in the class, but this is just to show you. And this is what happens if alpha equals 1.1. Then if there's some error term in some period, then it gets communicated to xt, and then it becomes xt minus 1, and then because alpha is 1.1, then it gets demultiplied the next period after and after and after, and then you get a catastrophe. So in Kegen model, it would mean something like people anticipate inflation, and then the velocity kick in, and the impact is so large that even if the money supply stays the same, just because of expectation, then inflation just becomes a hyperinflation. So that's again, that's a very strange process, because it necessitates that this denominator here is smaller than 1, smaller than 0, sorry. So just know that it exists, but you shouldn't waste too much sleep on that. All right, so quiz. So I'm being nice for the last quiz of the year. Don't worry, it's an easy quiz. And maybe we can take a break at the same time, so we don't wait too long for people. So let's say that you answer the quiz, and then we come back in something like, I don't know, 20 minutes maybe. So yeah, if we don't want to finish too late. So here I have, yeah, okay, so answer the, or yeah, I'm just going to read the quiz and you can ask me a question if you want, and then I give you 15 minutes to answer it. So question 1, ceteris paribus, meaning everything else being the same. If expected inflation goes up, how does velocity change? So you just have one formula that you can use and it gives you the answer right away. If real interest rates go up, how does velocity change? Thinking about the equation of exchanges, if velocity goes up, how must prices adjust? Ceteris paribus, if real output goes down, how must prices adjust? So we already almost basically answered that. And the last one is a tricky one, which does not have a clear-cut answer, but you give me your thoughts about it. So how is the Kegen's model that we just saw coherent or not coherent with the money facts seen previously? So the money facts, I remind you, are these money facts. Yeah, so the key takeaway from the money facts is that there is this long-term relation between the money supply and inflation. So in the long run, what really changes, what can change in a very large way is the cash balances in the economy and the price level. And yeah, there can be some link between real GDP and prices, for instance, or money growth, but it's quite small. As you can see, it's not very significant. So that's what I mean by money facts. Okay, so answer that, and we are back in 15 minutes. Unless I have some question about this. I think it's quite clear. All right then, so see you in 15 minutes. Okay, let's see how guys did. Yeah, mostly good. Okay, one, if expected inflation goes up, how does velocity change? Goes up. Perfect. I hope it's going to be like that for the final exam. Well, it's my fault. I have to ask simple questions and I get perfect scores. Yeah, ceteris paribus, if real interest rates go up, how does velocity change? So if real interest rate, so you can all read a mathematical equation. That's not the point. The point is always to keep, so that's something I would like to ask in exams. So maybe people can think that my exams are a bit mathematical and that I'm not asking stuff like, oh, explain to me in words, some concept. Thing is, it's very difficult to correct, to grade, to be fair, to know if somebody understands or not. But that doesn't mean that economics is just formulas. Economics is about understanding the society, how people interact, how people think. And the thing is, we use formulas to just structure our thoughts a bit. Yeah. So in real words, how would I answer that question? Well, if real interests rates go up, then it means that it's more profitable for me to say, put my money at the bank or buy bonds or stuff like that. Some other vehicles than the liquid money. So I want to get my money as quickly as possible to the bank. So to keep it with me as a short period as I can. So that's what it means. So of course, yeah, velocity goes up. Thinking about the oh yeah, so almost everybody got it right. If velocity goes up, how must prices adjust? Well, if so again, it's ceteris paribus. So if velocity goes up and M cash balances don't change and output don't change, then it means that the only thing that can happen is that prices will change. Prices will go up. So this essentially means that, so if I have the same amount of money available for transaction, but people just need a very small amount and they can go to the store very quickly, then it means that that at some point the store has to increase prices. Ceteris paribus, if real output goes down, how much prices adjust? Well, that's what happened in Zimbabwe, or what happened in the Weimar Republic after the war. So if you don't have as many goods to buy as before, then the goods are more valuable and you raise your prices. So as a store, for instance. So that's why we do that. And then is the Kegen model coherent? Oh, Agama, Go, Eng, Mapuke. I don't know what this is. I'm not used to these trends. No, yes. Please sit on my face. Somebody wrote that in Spanish last time, so I don't know who's trolling me there, but I'm not going to answer that. Oh, okay. Okay, I don't know what to do with your answers. So don't answer that in your final exam. It's not going to be good. Yeah, so what I wanted to say about this, yeah, for real. So yeah, let me hide what your answers were. So is the Kegen model coherent with many facts? Well, okay, so can somebody serious tell me what they think? Okay, so let me think. Let me tell you what is my best answer. So first of all, they don't. Yeah, let me go back to the class. So first of all, they don't describe the same phenomenon in the sense that the money facts are about the long term. So on average, for a period of say 30 years, what were the link between increase in prices and increase in the, so here I'm not saying anything special. I'm going to go to this equation there. Okay, what was the link between increase in money and increase in prices, for instance, over the long run? Whereas the Kegen model describes sudden, quick changes in prices that are over and above changes in the other variables. So in that sense, it's not that one says something opposite to the other, is that they talk about different things. Yet they are coherent in one way, in the way that both of them start with the money demand equation. So in the long run, if velocity doesn't change, doesn't become permanently larger or smaller, if it's just a temporary phenomenon, then at some point, the changes in money supply will have to be reflected in changes in prices and output. And as if changes in output are not that large compared to changes in M and P, then even a Kegen model would be coherent with the money facts. So for instance, in Zimbabwe, what happened is there was a crazy hyperinflation for 1 month or a year, for instance. And then, so the Zimbabwean dollar completely lost its value. And yet, we do observe that one, prices went up extremely fast, and two, money supply went up extremely fast because, why? Because this Zimbabwean dollar was issued. So this is it's a reflection of the fact that prices were up, but also this is an increase in cash balances because it's putting out there in the economy $1 trillion bills. So that's a huge increase in prices. But it doesn't say really why. So that's something about the money facts. Money facts just say that's something that we do observe, but we don't say why we observe that. We don't say it's because there was inflation and then there was money growth, or there was money growth and then there was inflation. There's no talk about causality here. And what is the causality in real life? In Kegen model, it goes from money growth to inflation. What happens is you emit a lot of money and then inflation kick in. And in the short term, you can have a change in velocity that creates this possibility for a real increase in prices real quick. But if we accept that in the long run, eventually velocity goes back down, then you should see this long-term relation go hand in hand. But there could also be a link from inflation to money growth. Can somebody tell me what the name of this link is? Yeah, I've been talking a lot. So what I've been saying is in the Kegen model, we have these precursor to inflation that are change in output or change in cash balances, for instance, in money supply. So essentially, we try to explain prices. So inflation is change in prices with changes in money. Could we think of a link the other way around? So from inflation to money?
Well, we don't not want to have deflation. So at one point, if we have inflation and that it sort of would get back to its previous level, we wouldn't agree with that. So we would increase the amount of money in the economy to compensate for this potential deflation.
Okay, so I get your last part, but I didn't get the first part exactly. Could you repeat?
Like it was kind of the same idea, I think.
So why would so what you see is we anticipate inflation, so we react by changing the money supply. But so why would we change the money supply as response to inflation? It has two words in the name. Yeah, it's just too fresh. Maybe you don't remember. It's sorry. Somewhere on this slide.
The Oliveira Effect.
Yes, exactly. So that is something else. That is something that is not present in the Kegen model. In the Kegen model, governments or the central bank perfectly controls the money supply. That's something that's exogenous. So MT is just something I choose. But in real life, especially in the countries where there's no independence of the central bank, and where governments have a hard time controlling collecting taxes, and if there's a hyperinflation, then yes. So it can be that in day one there was small inflation, but then the government says, "Oh, I'm kind of short on cash. Let's just print a bit," and then in day two or maybe in month two, then there is more inflation. So okay, let me print even more money, and then it goes. That's a different different way in which we could explain this this money fact. That is not part of the Kegen model. So so then just to conclude, so the Kegen model is concerned with the shorter time span of say 1 month or 1 year, whereas these are money facts about the long term. And yet we would say that they are mostly in agreement just because there is this overarching reality of the equation of exchanges. And the only way in which you would really see a disconnect between the money balances and prices is would be, for instance, if velocity changed incredibly much, but hyperinflation episodes are short. So, or in Brazil, it took a long time, but when you finish the hyperinflation episode, then you're back to normal velocity, and all the money you've printed, then they're just out there, and so prices are incredibly high, and the money balance are incredibly high, but who cares, because nobody uses that currency anymore. We use some other currency. But so these money facts are reflected. So if we wanted to look at Zimbabwe for over that period, then it would be like here, as they would have printed incredibly high amount of money, and the price level would have gone extremely high. So it wouldn't be in disagreement. Okay, so let me just finish this, and then I can talk a bit about yeah. So I said so what was amazing about Kegen's work is that he attempted to estimate his equations. So what he wants is to pin down these parameters, so understand what they are, what are their value, using facts that are observable. So alpha and lambda, they have to do with how people react to nominal interest rates, or how people form their expectations. So nobody knows. But what we do observe is how prices change, our real money, our real balance change. And then by observing these changes over time, we can try to understand what these things are. So in some macro models, we say we calibrate the parameters, or in that case, he really estimated the model and inferred what the coefficients were. So his episodes are Austria, Germany, Greece, Hungary 2 times. So Hungarians were really unlucky or bad at managing their money, because they had hyperinflation episode in the 20s and after World War II. So the crazy one was after World War II, but they also had one after World War I. Yeah, so the two measures he uses for inflation, is the change in price, is the average inflation rate, so per month average. And you see the craziness of Hungary. So sometimes we think of yeah, what happened in the Weimar Republic was bad, but you see it's 300% per month. They are the champion by such a margin. It's impossible to beat them. Yeah, and they use the Russian case, Poland. So I didn't talk about all these things, but you can read about them. And then for real balances, what he uses is, so real balances is money divided by prices. And so if they become very low because prices are very high, then that's when things are very bad. So what he does is, so use real balances, look at the worst month during the episode compared to the month before the hyperinflation episode started. Now you may think this is confusing, or so my answer is, don't worry about this. I'm not going to question you about what exactly he did, because that's one exercise that has its merits, but its flaws too. So I'm just saying what he did, but you don't have to understand. Basically, what you have to understand is this is a measure of cash balances, of money in circulation, and this is a measure of the increase in prices. And it is obvious that there is this inverse link. So if real cash balances were very low at some point, then it's a reflection of the fact that inflation was very high. And if inflation was mild, then these still stayed high, and if inflation was very, very high, then these become very, very, very small.
I don't know what is real balances.
Yeah, so it's money divided by the price level, and it's because money, of course, it's some nominal. So money in Zimbabwe, what is it? Well, it's the amount of bills in circulation, but divided by their general price level in the economy. And it's minimum divided by initial. It means that so before the hyperinflation episode started, so right at the first period of the first month of the period, it had some value, some number for this real balance. And then when prices became extremely high, then these became very, very small. Because, so yeah, the governments emitted a lot of money, but still at some point the prices skyrocketed even faster than the amount of money circulating. So this is how low it became at one point. So what we do is we take the minimum months divided by the initial month of the period. So yeah, so that's all I'm going to say about this. But so it's just to know what we're talking about, but don't worry about it. Is my advice for you. Oh yeah, I forgot to update the table. Sorry. So what he does is estimate this equation there. So price in period t, in log terms, of course, equals to, so this is a linear regression if you want to know. And yet in his paper, it's not exactly a linear regression what he does, but you could estimate it with linear regression. So that's the equation that you estimate. So price period t is equal to, so it's 1 month, is equal to beta 1 times the price in period in the last period, so previous month, plus beta 2 times money balance. So this is real balances this month minus beta 3 times real balances last month, plus some error term that has mean 0 and some standard deviation, but you can forget it. And using the value of beta 1, beta 2, and beta 3, then we know that beta 1 represents in the model this quantity there, beta 2 represents this 1 over this quantity there, and beta 3 represents 1 over this quantity there. Here I put ats because they are estimated, so that's what we do in econometrics. And then using this, I can, actually it's overdetermined. I can just use these two, for instance, and I could deduce the value of alpha and lambda. But it turns out that it's kind of coherent in the sense that if I deduce with these two, the value of alpha and lambda, and I compute what beta 1 should be, it's not that far from the beta 1 estimated. But yeah, so that's the art of doing empirical work. You always have to to adjust the your model to reality or reality to your model. They never fit perfectly. Yeah, and so what is what is representative of an episode of hyperinflation would be if beta 1, this beta 1 is extremely high, so close to 1. And that happens if this thing is negative, and this thing is negative for two countries, Germany and Russia. But as I told you, with if this is negative, it's a very strange thing, so don't worry too much about it. Yeah, so I'm essentially showing you his exercise, but I wouldn't be very nice to ask too many questions about his exercise in the exam, if you understand what I'm saying. Since it's imperfect and it's estimating an imperfect model. But still, it's amazing that he managed to do that and get some realistic value for the parameters. Oh, I wish I would remember what the lambdas are, but these are the alpha he measures. And still, they are quite high. So I was saying that alpha cannot be too high, but still, sometimes he measures very high alphas. Yeah. All right. So yeah, so this is the most important. So to take home of the Kegen paper, but also all we've seen so far in terms of hyperinflation. So the need for fiscal discipline. So you and the need for a independent central bank. So the government has to use taxes to finance itself. It cannot finance itself just by inventing or creating new money, or going to the central bank and saying, "Oh, please allow me to spend some new money that you create." That it cannot work. If you do that, then hyperinflation is not that far. Expectations matter. So if people don't panic when they see prices change, then the mechanism by which you get hyperinflation is not that strong. So hyperinflation is not that likely. In real life, you can see hyperinflation because if some government prints tons of money, then of course price levels are going to go up, but they won't go up because of this velocity channel that we were talking about. Important to anchor individuals' inflation expectation. So that's a bit the same thing. So essentially, the way to get out of momentum-driven inflation is for people to believe that the currency they're using is going to be stable. Otherwise, its prices are always going to go up. Yeah. So one of the ways to have inflation, central bank that has the reputation for being hawkish, as we say, so being very strong in terms of keeping prices under control. So that's what the European Central Bank tried to do initially, and it was criticized a bit because unemployment can be high in Europe, for instance, in France. So people were saying, yeah, maybe you can be less focused on keeping price levels constant, and maybe if there is a bit of inflation, but if it helps the labor market, then why not? But yeah, the European Central Bank, they wanted to establish a reputation, is what people are said. So they wanted to make sure that people would know that the euro is stable no matter what. So that's why even when there was the crisis in Italy or Greece, the value of the euro didn't change that much because people knew that, yeah, it's stable, there's Germany in that, and yeah, we can trust it. Yeah, so this is the last one is just a reminder of the money facts. Room for improvement in the Kegen model. So you need very high velocity to create a hyperinflation, but it's not all that clear if people react as much as they do. Maybe they do in the hyperinflation episode. It's just that we don't see them all that often, so it's hard to know what alpha really is. Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. If M is not, if you like triple M, but PR is multiplied by 10, well, then what you need is V multiplied by 10. So maybe that's right, maybe that's not right. At some point, V is going to go back down, so you're going to find again this long-term relation between M, F, and P. So yeah, so well, I'm not saying it ignores, but it's talking about something different. And yeah, as I said, the Kegen model is not micro-founded. And the weakest part is this fact that to have a real episode of hyperinflation when prices go out of control, you would need essentially this to be negative. And it would mean that a increase in money supply today decreases prices today, which is very difficult to. So here what I did is I rewrote the equation to make this appear there. So MT minus 1. So it's a small change that I did. Yeah. Okay, so how much time do we have? So we have until 5. Yeah, I can say a few words about Venezuela, and then we can hop on the chapter 2. So really quickly, are there any questions about what I said here? It's mostly a reminding of what I said earlier.
I don't understand why it is a problem that increasing the money supply today decreases price today.
Well, maybe the real life is like that. It's just if you ask most economists, they're going to say that no, if you increase money supply, usually you increase prices. Can you elaborate a bit?
Oh, okay, I understand.
Yeah, so that's and especially it's strikes us as super counterintuitive, but because we see these this thing, if you increase money supply, you should increase prices. So if you in that case, if you increase money supply, prices go down, so you would get this relation there. So it's really counterintuitive, and it has to do with this this velocity playing a huge role in prices. Who knows in short term maybe, but in the long term that it cannot be true. So don't ever think that may be the case. Yeah, and why would we find this? We find this because it's a bit an ad hoc model in the sense that we just see there's this V equals alpha I, and then this, and then we say that the anticipation of inflation are adaptative, and that's the way it is. So it's very simple. It's good because it allows us to think in a somehow crude way, but simple way. If we wanted to have a more sophisticated model with microfoundation, then you get so much more equations, and they're not easy to calibrate to these models. But that's so this is the price for simplicity. All right. If you want a simple model, then you can get extreme cases. But in most cases, it's reasonable to think that this is positive. So alpha times 1 minus lambda is less than 1. So the Kegen model can pretty much capture short-term changes in inflation in prices. Yeah. Yeah, so let me go on with Venezuela. Yeah, so Venezuela, what happened? So it got very rich because of high oil prices, and Venezuela, as you might know, is a big oil exporter. And at the same moment, there was Chavez that took power, and he used a big chunk of this nationally owned, so government-owned or controlled income from the oil production to increase the social programs and give back to the poor that really needed it in Venezuela. So all good while it lasts. Problem is at some point in the 2010s, then the prices went down quite fast. And that's when what they did, well, they didn't have enough money to finance the government. And at the same moment, also another mechanism that goes on is that you begin to have shortages. So the few stores that are still open, they don't have a lot of goods, so the price of goods go up by themselves. But also, of course, the government needed to finance itself by emitting more money. So really quickly, the inflation got out of hand, and you can bet that things haven't improved since then, especially since the COVID-19 crisis. Oil prices are way down, so the situation in Venezuela is very, very bad. Yeah. So the problem in a nutshell, so the oil represents 95% of Venezuela's export and 25% of its GDP. So, but imagine, so all their export basically is oil. And what happens too in this situation is that they, if they're so rich because they can export oil, so it becomes cheap to import goods. So imagine you have a store of anything like apples, and you sell your apples, but then it's easier for other people to just export oil and buy apples from abroad. Then as an apple producer, at some point you say, oh, I can't compete with this, so I'm just going to close shop and go work in the oil sector because that's where the money is. So when you have this almost free money that comes from this natural resource, then it dries up all the other industries around it. And then when this goes away, then it's really a big shock for the economy because all these people that would work in something else, they stopped working in that other sector. So yeah, when oil prices crashed, then it's yeah, and as far as state revenue comes, then 56% of state revenue came from oil. Yeah, so in between 2014 and 15, the oil prices fell by 50%. So yeah, Y went down and P went up. So yeah, there was way too much currency in circulation for the amount of goods that you could exchange or import. So then the Oliveira effect again. So M went up because of M went up because tax revenues were not enough. So prices even got even larger. Yeah, and as I said, so the cutbacks in social programs. So one other aspect is that if as a government you don't have any money to sustain social programs, then in the short term, people who depend on that to buy other food and other stuff, they can't buy them anymore. So it depresses the economy even more. So again, Y went down and P went up. So many different channels that we can discuss. So yeah. So people say that there is this international campaign against Venezuela, or they say it's a judgment on Chavez, or when these things happen, it's very hard for any government to do something about them. So you can see they could have done things differently, but yeah, it's difficult. I don't want to be in their shoes. And yeah, shortages everywhere. And that's the worst is this. Can somebody read Spanish and tell me what this is?
There is no oil.
Means there is no gasoline.
Yeah, that's the worst. A country with such a high oil reserves, and they can't even pay for the extraction of their own oil. So back when Chavez was in power, oil was almost free, and now they're out of it. So yeah. So what solutions? I don't. So that's my 2 cents with what we learned in the class. I'm not saying that's what we should do, but so basically, like in Zimbabwe. So that solution for the economic situation in Venezuela, it's horrific. There is no easy way out. The country has to. So oil prices are never going to. Or I don't know, but they're not going to be the saving grace of the country. They have to start doing something else. And so it's very difficult. But in terms of hyperinflation, if we just look back at what we learned so far from the other episodes, then one way to deal with it is give up, like Zimbabwe. Say, okay, currency is toast. We can't use it anymore. So allow people to use alternative currency. So US dollars maybe, or a Bitcoin. So that would be one thing. Or if you want to emit a new national currency, what you would have to do is to convince people that it's going to be stable. So you have to anchor it to something. You cannot say, oh yeah, it's just some paper that has the value I say it has. You have to say to people, oh, if you have it, don't worry, it's never going to lose its value because you can always exchange it for something else. Well, what does Venezuela has? It has oil reserves. So you could say, oh, if there are some nationally owned oil reserves, then people can, you can back it up. Not say that people become owner of well, they can become owner, but they don't have to exploit it, but they can back it up with assets from nationally owned oil. And of course, so that's a non-negotiable. Anytime you have to balance the budget. So raise taxes and find a way to finance yourself with in other way than just emitting more money. But it's very hard because, of course, if you cut back government programs, it's extremely unpopular. You lose the election, or right now even the elections, I don't know if they're going to occur. So yeah, I'm not saying I know what to do. It's a very, very bad situation. Yeah, so one thing though so it's very easy to pass judgment in hindsight, but still, if you think about countries in the world, so many countries are oil producers, but they didn't go bankrupt like Zimbabwe, like Venezuela. So for instance, one country was Norway. So what's special about Norway? Well, they said we have so much money now, but we don't have to spend it right away. So if you go to Norway, if you go to Oslo, it looks nice, but it's not made of gold, or they don't have luxury hotels, or the government doesn't have a golden palace. They just have all this income that they say, oh, let's just keep it for future generations. We don't need it right away. We're happy with what we have. So right now, if you become a Norwegian citizen, you sort of get, by this date, might be 200,000 US dollar worth of this fund. Doesn't mean that you get it because you can't spend it. It's just for future generation. But that's, if you divide the amount of the fund right now with the number of citizens in Norway, that's how much every citizen has. So that's a big chunk of money. So in Venezuela, I know that it's tempting to be popular and give back in social programs, but the responsible thing to do may be to put aside some of it and pay back the debt, and make sure that when the oil revenue dries up, you still have a way to finance yourself in the medium term. And of course, diversify the economy, so not rely only on oil, but that's difficult. All right, so that's it for this chapter. Any last question before we jump on Easter Island? All right, so let me just tell you what I want to say about Easter Island. We have half an hour, so I know exactly what I want, because I had one question with one of the things.
I have maybe a question on the exam.
Okay, go ahead.
For the computation, do we have to do it on, I don't know, on the paper and scan it, or?
No, yeah, I didn't want to give you the trouble, so it's just multiple choice. So you just say, is it A, B, C, D, E, for instance, and it would be a number. Like, is it A2, B3, C4? So you do your computation, but no matter what's written on the paper, if you get lucky and circle the right thing, good for you. If you're unlucky, but your computation on the paper was kind of good, too bad, it's bad. Oh, my computer is slow. Okay. This graph there. So this is a question I think one or two people ask. So what's going on there? So it's the most complicated one. So I'm going to go in relatively more detail than I would have otherwise. So I didn't produce these graphs. So they are from Taylor's paper based on Easter Island. Okay, so to understand them, let me go back here. Yeah, so it's the same as this, but what is different? First of all, the axes are flipped, so it has L on the y-axis, X on S on the x-axis. I don't know why he did that. It was perfectly good this way, So there was no reason to switch it, but yeah, he switched it. And then the other different thing is that it has some tipping point. So resources have some tipping point, which are T, I believe. Which so if you have K here, for instance, this is the carrying capacity. So tipping point is like maybe 10% or 20% of the carrying capacity. So that's, for instance, how much. So if you cut, say, 80% of the forest or more, then the forest can never recover. So what does that mean? Well, it means that compared to this graph here, this graph, if you are on this side of this line with S dot equals 0, then you see that the stock of S, the stock of resources always increases. But if I have some threshold there, so I say it's T. Then I will have on that side, it's the nature is always going to go down. So I can draw some arrow there. Oops. So this is what happens. Of course, you have this whole thing there. So the dynamic is, if I get on that side, then S goes to 0. And if I stay on that side, then I get again my spiral as I have. Oops. Here. Okay, so this just to put you in context what this is. Now let me go back. Yeah. So let me take, for instance, this one. So here it's a question of how much taxes there is. So taxes are essentially convincing people to consume less food, so to harvest less. So it means that the more taxes I have, the more nature has a chance. Compared to here it's tau equals 0 is, well, I could actually go with this one because this is exactly like the Easter Island of the previous paper of Brandon and Taylor. So before I had K here, now I have K here, and I had my tipping point there, so it's here. And this is the same spiral as before. So this is the tipping point. If I'm ever on that side, then the nature goes to 0. No matter what we do, there's a crisis. It's over. So yeah, let me put my arrows again. All right. And if I stay on that side, then it depends if I'm on this side or this side of the. So this is population, L. All right, so let me ask you. So this is the curve where population is stable, where resource stock is stable. So just to see if somebody understands. So should I draw a red arrow this way or that way if I'm here on this side of the green curve here? Not necessarily an easy question. No clue? So if there are more people in the island, is it good or bad for nature?
Bad.
Yes. So here is the higher I am on this graph, it means I have more population. So what does that mean for the dynamic of the stock?
It decreases.
Yes, so the arrow points right or left?
Left.
Yes, exactly. So let me draw my arrow here. So here I have this other thing, so I'm going to draw two. One and two. So, and if I have a low population, so I'm closer to this axis here, so then I should have arrows that point
Right.
Yes, right. So this is for my my nature's arrows. Now, why did I draw two? Because I have to think about what happens to population. Here it's before it was just a horizontal line, so now it became a vertical line. That's my L dot equals 0. That's the amount of resources I need for population to be stable on the island. If I have more resources, then is population increasing or decreasing?
Increasing.
Yes. So I'm going to put vertical arrows there. Oops. And if I'm on this side, then it's decreasing. Yeah, this one is a bit long. And I even have these two on that side. So that's it. That's how this works. Now there is one tricky part is the tipping point there. So before we had this line that was straight. It was a green line that started at K and went down. Here there's tipping point, so it's not straight anymore. It's curved. So that's strange, but yeah, you have to accept that that's what happens when you add this tipping point there. And here what he drew is, so obviously these are the spirals, and you can see that if I stay on that side of the tipping point, then I'm going to slowly spiral to the long-term sustained island case. And what was I saying? Oh yeah, and here this represents the critical trajectory. So if you start, say here, then you will go back this way, this way, this way, this way. You just have to follow the arrows. And you arrive exactly at T. And this is called a saddle path because it's somewhere where if you are like, if there's a fly that makes you fall on that side, then you go back to this this equilibrium. But if you have some fly that makes you fall on that side, then you go to 0. So it's an unstable steady state, if you want, but it exists. If you're exactly on T, then that's it. So population doesn't change anymore, and resource stock doesn't change anymore. But as soon as you you go on one side or the other, you're going to go back either to this equilibrium there or to that place there. Yeah, so that's what I wanted to say. Yeah, one thing too that we see is what happens when you have more taxes. So more taxes discourage people from exploiting nature. And what happens is then you see that here it takes a while for you to spiral to the steady state. here with very high taxes, then people don't exploit nature too fast. And it means that they settle very quickly on the sustained island steady state. That's one thing. One other thing that we can see is that this critical path is much higher than here. It means that here, if I start with a very large population, I'm sure I'm going to go cut all the forest and go to 0. Whereas here, if I start with a high population, still I'm good. I'm going to spiral to this steady state. And last point is, if you look at the value here, it's a bit small, but let me make this bigger. Yeah. So here the steady state is at a value of nature of 6,000. So it's not 6,003, it's 6,000, that's a number that they choose. But you see that here it's 7,000 and here it's almost 8,000. So at the steady state, of course, if people exploit nature less, then steady state is higher. But the impact on L is ambiguous because yes, they harvest less, but there's more nature. So it's not all that clear at steady state if you have more or less population, if you have more taxes. Yeah, right, that's about it.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
What do you use to draw the arrow? Because in TD we use some equation, and now I see that you just do it. You just draw that and.
Okay. Well, well, if you use the equation, you can do that. But so that's the beauty of economics. Is it's at the bottom of it, it has to make sense with our everyday experience. So I'm not, and I'm not being mean to you by showing you models that are completely counterintuitive with what our everyday experience is. So here I'm just asking myself, so if I want to draw some, I'm telling you two things. I'm telling you that the values of S and L for which S is stable is this green line there. So values here, they will either S is going to go to the right or the left, and values here again S is going to go to the right or the left. And then I don't show you the equation, but then I ask myself, what makes intuitive sense? Well, what is on that side? On that side is L is high, and on that side is L is low. And what do I know about the impact of L, of population, on the stock of nature? Well, more people means they exploit nature more, so it's bad for nature. So nature should go down. So that's all I need to know that, okay, if I want to draw an arrow, let's draw it like this. And if I have few people on the island, then okay, it means that so if I have one person on the island, okay, it's good. Then I can know that probably then the trees are recovering and things are going well. So probably S is going to go back up. So I can draw it here. Now, what's tricky is that I have this tipping point, and I know that if I'm below this tipping point, then I know that nature has to be this way. But that's the special case of this more complicated Taylor model. But so I suggest to you to always do the two things. Ask yourself what makes sense. Okay, well, it makes sense that if I have many people on the island, they exploit nature and nature should go down. If I have few people, nature should go up. And then check with your equation. Okay, if I, for instance, if I start here and I increase L, then I look at my equation here. I don't have it, but yeah, you remember. So if I, where's my mouse? Oh, yeah. So I know from the equation, let me. so this is the equation. Oops. All right. So if I know that I'm at steady state, so here, then I know that so nature doesn't change, so I don't have a left pointing, a right pointing arrow or left pointing arrow. And then I can ask myself, so what happens if L increases, for instance? Oh, well, I have L here, and there's a negative sign in front of it. So it means that S dot is going to be negative, so it means that negative. So it makes, so the thing is, I chose my model to have a negative sign because intuitively I want that if I have people on the island, S goes down. So I can choose the equation to answer that, but also I know that that's the arrow I have to make sense with my model, and I'm hoping that the math and the reality fit together. And that's the same thing with for population. I know that if I have a lot of food, then it's good for population. So I should have a right up pointing arrow. And if I have not too much food, then I know that it's people are starving, so it should go down. And then you can check with your equation there. And yes, so you know that S has a positive impact on L. So that's always so I know it takes training, but if you try to have some common sense about what should be going on, and it's very helpful then to understand the computation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so yeah, I said mostly everything I wanted to say. We have 3 minutes left, so yeah. Any last question? Otherwise, I am going to.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I don't understand the link between taxes and what you were saying about population and production.
Okay. So that's this new model here. And what I did was introduce taxes. And I introduced him here. This is different from the paper, but it's just I thought it's easy to introduce them as tau here. And you can solve again all the model, and you're going to find that, so if I introduce taxes on harvesting, then it means that people are going to consume less of it. So this is the individual demand for food. Before it was beta W divided by P. So now I have this extra term 1 plus tau here. That's the taxes. So if I don't tax people, this is 1, and I'm back with the old model. And if I tax people, then they demand less harvests. And then I can aggregate stuff, and I eventually find I find this HGT is just to say that there's taxes in them, and I have tau there. So I have less harvests if I tax food, of course. Yeah, so taxes on food discourage harvesting. And then what is going to matter? So can I see it? So let's ask ourselves, for instance, where is this L equation? L curve there. So I said that L is increased when taxes go up. So let's see if that's the case. So this is L dot. So at the steady state island, okay, this is L dot. At the steady state island for L, then this with positive L, then this has to be 0, and I find that S star equals to 1 plus tau divided by alpha beta times minus b divided by phi. So the 1 plus tau that was here, that came from this harvest, is now the numerator. And I see that if I increase tau, then this value for S star that makes people not, that's made the population stable, goes up. And this is what I find. So if I increase taxes, then this S goes to here 8,000, 7,000, 6,000. Yeah, so this is where it comes from.
Okay.
I have a question. Is the exercise 4 of the last TD at the program of the exam?
What is it? Is it the very big thing with overlapping generations and production and all of these
Yes.
Yeah, so now you're asking me, what can I not study?
Yes.
So this is okay. So this is part of the of the exam program, and I'm going to send an email saying exactly what you cannot.
About the TD.
C'est sur le OLG model.
Yeah. So the right now what I have to say is everything from chapter 2 on is a part of it. And now I know what is part of the exam or not. So I don't want to say yes or no. I'm going to answer to say exactly the same thing to everybody. So sorry, I can't answer.
Okay, so you will send an email with more
yes,
precise.
With the program. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Other questions?
And the exam will be a QCM?
Yes. Oh, and one thing I forgot to say, but I can tell you right away is bring your dictionary, because yeah, it's managed exams, so it's limiting for me. I try to email them and ask them, oh, can I write 2 versions with people answering on one part, and can I put bonus points? Can I do this? Can I do that? And they haven't answered. So I made just a normal exam, all in English, with no bonus points. So yeah, that's quite what's going to change from the midterm.
Okay. And it will be QCM. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
But yeah, again, my style of questions in QCM is I can say something like, this is the equation, but these are the values of the parameters, and now compute this thing. And this thing is, since you have, instead of variables, you have values for R, for instance, or tau or something, then what you can say is, okay, now I can compute the numerical value of whatever I'm asking you. And then the multiple choice is like A0, B1, C2, D3, for instance, and you have to pick the right answer. So it's kind of multiple choice, but it looks like what it looked like a non-multiple choice, if you understand.
So it won't be like the midterm?
Hopefully it will be
with justification.
Yeah, no justification.
Okay.
Yeah, hopefully it's going to be. So yeah, the midterm. In the end, some people didn't read that they had to justify. So I don't want to give them 0 because they forgot to read an instruction. Everybody does that in their life. So then I had to create a scheme where I would give some points for justification, but some points for not just, and then yeah, it became super complicated. So hopefully it's going to be simple for how I grade the final exam.
So would it be easier than the midterm?
So yesterday I wrote the exam and I thought, oh, is it too difficult or not? Because I tend to make difficult questions. So I sent it to my the TD, the people who did the TD, and said, so they said, yeah, that question is a bit tricky, and I agree with them, so I changed it. But overall, they said it was a fair exam. So it usually what I try to have is some part of the question that is very easy if you just listen, and then some part that is a bit more challenging. You have to think a bit. And so also well, if you I recognize your voice, so I think I might have had you as a student last year too.
Yes.
So so what but yeah, I didn't. So you haven't seen my exams, obviously, because it was a common exam. But I personally, I've always hated exams that were just learn by heart and apply it.
Yes.
So I try to make it as original as I can, but still, answerable with. Please don't try to just learn to do the same exercise by heart. It's not bad to do that, but it's not going to save you. You have to think economically and be able to figure out what to do in a new novel situation in some way.
Okay.
And are there negative points for the
No,
question?
never. No, I think this is anti-pedagogical to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Because you're never 100% sure of your answer. So if every time you tell yourself, "Oh, maybe I misunderstood," and no, you circle everything at random if you don't know. Okay.
Okay. So thank you.
Thank you, and yeah, good luck for your studies and the final exam.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.